consequences like this are going to force a change in policing. Like, we've struggled over the idea of reimagining public safety. We collectively, as a society. Now, there are some who went way too far in the failed defund police movement, and there are some who are way too resistant to any kind of change. But we see what's happening here in our community, not just here, but across the nation, and trust is gone. So if that's the case, we need to reimagine this. And we can do that in a healthy way. We need different voices and to bring people together and to say, okay, what does this look like and how can we help? Because it's not only about the community safety, it's about police safety too, and putting police in proper position to help them succeed as well. Former Brooklyn Center police officer Kim Potter found guilty of both first and second degree manslaughter, showing that there are real consequences for her actions. I want to go through this with Roshini Rajkumar, C-suite strategist, crisis coach, licensed attorney. We had her on last week and said, let's recap once we get a verdict. And then that went on over the course of 4 days. Roshini, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Cory. Wow, crazy holiday week it was.
Yeah, it really was. And I know last time we talked, at the end of our conversation, I'd asked you, well, what do you expect to happen? And you had said, well, I expect a second-degree manslaughter conviction, first-degree, not so much. Well, now we got a first-degree conviction on Kim Potter as well. I'll just let you take it from here. What are your thoughts now that the first-degree conviction happened?
Well, let me start by saying this, Cory. The charging position is such a place of power. So when a prosecutor decides to charge a certain charge, that sets a lot of things into motion. And way back when this was originally charged out by Washington County Attorney Pete Orput, I really thought, okay, if there's going to be a charge here and it's not just a civil wrongful death case, the second-degree manslaughter charge was correct. I was dismayed when Keith Ellison added in the first-degree manslaughter charge. And here's a big reason why, Cory. What people need to remember is when one person, one officer is on trial, it's just one person, it's one officer. It is not the whole system. And this trial was another situation, and probably to our detriment, where it seemed like the entire system or all law enforcement was on trial. And that's a dangerous position to be in. So the second-degree manslaughter charge, where the jury ended up deciding the next morning, so their first full day of deliberations after about 7 hours total of deliberations, they came up with guilty on the second-degree charge. And then remember, last Tuesday, they asked the judge, what if we can't come to compromise? What happens then? Yep. So it took them until Friday morning at 11:40, a couple hours before the verdict was announced, to come up with the first-degree guilty charge, guilty on that first-degree charge. They could have just as well been hung on that. They could have just as well said not guilty on that. So I was very surprised by that first-degree guilty verdict, because I don't think the facts of this case and the situation really lent itself to that. But the jury is the decider of the facts, and that's where they landed.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, right? It's just one particular case, but I think that you and I, we can go and look and say, this probably doesn't get, Kim Potter probably doesn't, I don't even know if she gets charged 5 years ago, let alone convicted. And right. So we've seen this morph and change now over the last 5 years, and there are higher standards and consequences for police officers than ever before. So what are some of the implications here for safety and for police?
Well, first, Cory, I think you have a whole slew of law enforcement that will not want to not only just not draw a weapon, but they will not possibly pull over people that should be pulled over. Or, let's get away from the pulling over in a car. Just letting someone go as a crime is in progress, or potential crime is in progress, and then let's see how many other people are at risk or get killed because of that. I mean, this might sound dramatic, but this is absolutely a consequence that could come out of this. That's why it's so important that we remember one person is on trial, not the whole system, not every law enforcement officer. And Cory, guess what? You and I, your family, our neighbors, everyone is in jeopardy when anybody is mischarged or even found guilty for something that really didn't warrant a guilty verdict, because then it just puts the future narrative in more of a disarray and gets farther away from what our Constitution intended.
Yeah, well, and then the other part of that too, Roshini, that I wonder, and I think this is probably pretty pretty obvious, but there are going to be a lot of people who just say, well, I don't want to be a police officer at all, and I think that's been going on as well. And maybe this is just a moment in time where it's like until the job is defined a little bit better as we move forward in this reimagining, and like, oh, do they respond to this? Do they respond to that? Where do they respond? Who comes with them? Who doesn't? But I wonder, I would imagine that there will be more and more police officers now either transferring or saying, you know what, maybe I should do something else. I wonder about training and young officers coming through the system if they just decide, look, this is getting really, really hard, and for a job that is really critiqued quite, and in some areas become the enemy. And it's like, why would I want to do that now?
Exactly. I mean, you listed off a whole array of things that absolutely have been happening and are going to happen to a bigger extent. You've got situations where we are going for more different kinds of people, more diversity, more inclusion in police ranks, but then you also have a lot of people that look at what's happening to current officers, whether they deserve it or not, these officers. And anyone who is maybe even thinking of law enforcement might say, I don't know that I want to be on the street. I don't want to be highly scrutinized in that way. I don't think there's any other profession right now that's getting scrutinized to the degree that law enforcement is getting scrutinized. I mean, look, you and I as talk show hosts, we get scrutinized all the time, but it's our job. And, some of us have a high degree of being disagreed, tolerance for being disagreed with, but that's a whole different thing than what's happening here with law enforcement today, Cory.
Yeah. Roshini Rajkumar here, RoshiniGroup.com. She's a licensed attorney. Can I ask you this too? Kim Potter gets a new mugshot and she's smiling, which, look, I think if you take a step back, people, when they are uncomfortable or even just like in general, you're getting your picture taken, lots of times you smile, like there's a lot of reasons why she could be smiling there, and it's hard for us, and we shouldn't really project our own thoughts on it, but regardless, people are going to, they see the mugshot, it looks very odd, the optics are really bad. Do attorneys tell the clients, hey, look, you got to act in this particular way in this situation, and if you don't, there are going to be consequences from the public who are going to say, look, you're smiling in your mugshot. That's a really horrible thing to do.
Yeah, it was unfortunate. And the first story I saw that made a big case out of that was the New York Post. It is unfortunate she was smiling in that. It could have been, like you said, that nervous energy, that OMG, I can't believe this is all happening to me now, and just sort of an outer body experience. I mean, every little detail is going to be scrutinized. But, let's also talk about the TikTok video I saw of the Wright family dancing after that verdict came in. I don't think that would really be good optics, especially when there are lawsuits against the Dante Wright estate right now. So there are optics that are bad for all different people in this. I think we all have to remember we're human. I hope we can show each other grace. And look, Kim Potter's life has been turned upside down since April. It's getting even worse as she faces jail time. Now, that's another piece of this, Cory. Judge Regina Chu, who I think gained a lot of fans during this trial, she could come out and, first of all, I think it's preposterous that the state is trying to get a stepped-up sentence. This is not the case for that. This is not the defendant for that. In fact, I think it should be minimal, and I think that the judge really has an opportunity here to give Kim Potter little jail time and more probationary period, but we'll see. I mean, I haven't not talked to anybody. That's just my conjecture, but this sentencing phase now happening in February is the next piece of where we can see, the reality check.
Yeah, so first degree is punishable up to 15 years. I cannot imagine she'll get 15 years. I just kind of reading what I've read and talking to a couple different people, I would imagine, and you tell me, but I was imagining maybe in the 6 to 7, maybe, and then if that's the case, then she would serve, I guess, 4-ish, given Minnesota guidelines. What do you think?
Yeah, I see something a lot more like that. Again, I've been wrong before. I did not think she'd be convicted of first-degree manslaughter.
Yeah.
But the judge does have some discretion within the guidelines that are set up. I think it is an absolute waste of time for the state to try to get more years on this one. It's a waste of legal time. It's a waste of taxpayer dollars, because there's actually a legal, there are rules by which you have to follow and argue to get that stepped up time. It really doesn't apply here.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said it too, Roshini. Just to kind of put a button on this, I'm glad you said it about grace, because that's how I've looked at this from the very beginning. In that, look, Daunte Wright should not be dead. He should not. And there are, you can feel for him and his child and his family, because he should not be dead. You can also feel for Kim Potter and her family, because quite clearly she did not wake up that morning saying, you know what, I want to shoot somebody. And of course not. Things happen, but there are consequences for actions. But I think we as people, we can step back and say, this is a tragedy. Let's learn from it. Let's try to make sure this does not go in vain, and that there are positive solutions that come from this, and that we don't see this again. That's where I land on this, is that it's very complex and nuanced, and I have a lot of feelings for everybody in this. It never should have happened, but it did, and I'm hoping that people can that we can learn from this and grow and say, how do we affect change so that it doesn't happen again?
Well, Cory, another thing is we have to remember the legislature is where laws are made. So statutes that require officers to pull motorists over for various things, that's not because the officers want to do that. It's because the legislature has made that a requirement. So the legislature is where regular citizens can go. They really want to affect change and say, hey, these are the kinds of laws we need to have law enforcement use. And that's where the change starts, and that's what we need to remember.
Yeah. You're hosting the next couple of days, right? What do you got planned? It's good to get you back on the mic.
I'm in for you the next 2 days. I'm excited to work with Chris Tubbs tomorrow and Dave on Wednesday. We've got some fun things planned. We have some serious things planned. And I know, Cory, I'm kind of bummed. I hope you listen. And not that you need this, but we're going to talk style and wardrobe tomorrow in the 11 o'clock hour. Men and women, this is the time to really ask yourself, do you need a little bump, a little boost in your overall look? Some people heading back into the office, some people living their life in sweats. I don't think that's a good idea. So we're going to get into it with a couple experts in that area.
We will send that to Dave Harrigan, because the guy I've been telling him, you got to wear some jeans around here every now and then. That's not asking too much, I don't think.
Oh, my gosh. Well, I think it's going
to
really open up a lot of cans of worms for people tomorrow.
Yeah. Roshini, glad to have you back. It'll be good to. I'm grateful that you're in Tuesday and Wednesday. Thank you for the conversation today, and let's talk again soon.
All right, Cory. Have a good couple of days off, too.
Roshini Rajkumar here, RoshiniGroup.com. She's a C-suite strategist, crisis coach, licensed attorney. She's going to be hosting the next couple of days here on News Talk 830 WCCO.